Amek. He now joins us via Skype for an in-depth look into the Syrian conflict. Thank you very much for joining us, Naeem. Now, who do you think is responsible for the attacks on the aid convoys that the UN has now suspended?
Well, firstly, I find it very difficult to believe that they can't figure it out who exactly was responsible. I mean, all of these planes that take off and carry out these bombing raids all have manifests, they have flight patterns that are lodged, but it seems most likely, without any concrete evidence, that it was either the Syrian regime planes or Russian planes that carried out this attack.
Now, the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon addressed the Assembly earlier today, and he was saying that the future of Syria should not rest in the hands of one man. What exactly was he speaking about in this instant?
Well, I mean, he was clearly referring to Bashar al-Assad, the current president of Syria. And in principle, of course, I think many of us would agree with him, and we would prefer that countries around the world operated on the basis of democracy, where you didn't have one strong man that ran the country and ran it as he generally wants to, but where people had the power to make their own decisions. They had the right to choose their own leaders, etc. So that was what he was referring to. It was slightly uncharacteristic of Ban Ki-moon, because he's usually a little more measured and much more of a diplomat. But I think it's a combination of things. One is he was clearly very angry at the attack on the aid convoy, and he seemed to have kind of lashed out a bit. And secondly, this is his really his last speech as Secretary General of the UN. So maybe he feels that he should just say whatever he wants to say, and you know, whatever the consequences might be.
Now, you've just mentioned that Ban Ki-moon has gotten to a point where he's angry, and this was his way of lashing out. Do you think that things have gotten to that point, or is it just going to be another situation where we have a talk shop, it ends, and then the conflict continues?
Well, I don't think we can expect that much will happen from the UN, even though the convoy that was attacked, of course, is a UN convoy, and it's the Red Crescent and Red Cross, which are in international bodies. So, but I don't think, just judging from the pattern over the past few years and longer than the past few years, I don't think that we can expect anything to come out of the UN in terms of this. We might have some statements like Ban's statement that was made. We may get other statements like that from other heads of state or foreign ministers or whatever the case might be, but no concrete action really. So I don't think that this ceasefire is going to be salvaged, despite what the Americans are saying, that there's a possibility that it can continue. It doesn't seem that that's likely. The fighting has resumed, and not just because of the attack on the convoy. The fighting resumed before that, and it's going on quite fiercely in some areas. So I don't think this ceasefire is salvageable. But what I do think is that each time that there is an attempt at a ceasefire, even if it doesn't last more than just a few days, and in this case, it lasted quite well for about 5 days or so, that even if it lasts just for a few days, the overall effect is often with ceasefires accumulative. So it's not that you had a ceasefire, it didn't work, and the next time you're starting from zero, or that you're starting from a negative because people have a negative attitude about ceasefires in general. Each time that there is a ceasefire, there's a kind of cumulative building of hope and the possibility that things can be better. People get a chance to see how things are for these few days as compared to what they have been for the past few years. And so I think that even though the ceasefire has almost clearly failed now, that I think it doesn't that it sets a basis for continued attempts at such a ceasefire in future.
Naeem, unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you very much for joining us on SABC News. That was the Executive Director of the Afro-Middle East Center, Amek, Naeem Jeenah, joining us via Skype for an in-depth look, well, rather a brief one, on the Syrian conflict.